This video contains spoilers for all 3 seasons of Showtime's Yellowjackets. When you take a creative writing course, the first thing you learn is the importance of the opening scene. It exists to clue your audience into the setting and what they might expect from it. Most importantly though, your task is to encourage your viewers to continue. Most editors know whether the story is worth publishing within the first 20 pages. This is also true for other artistic mediums, such as scripts. Yellowjackets does its opening scene so perfectly that it was voraciously spoken about years after the premiere of the pilot. A girl in white undergarments runs through the snow as she is hunted down amidst animalistic howling, ultimately falling down a pit of spikes, after which she is stripped naked and cannibalized by a group of teenage girls in absolutely terrifying costumes. By now you probably know that you're watching a show about a high school soccer team whose plane crashed into the Canadian wilderness, and right off the bat you are faced with the reality of what they are going to become. That will obviously make you want to know how exactly that journey took place, what were its milestones, what prompted these girls to embark on such a dark journey, turning from relatively normal teen girls into a cannibalistic cult. But when you do actually receive these answers by the end of season 3, it's disappointing. Before we start, remember that if you like my videos, like, subscribe and share so that more people can see it. Make sure to click the notification button so that you never miss a new video. Also, you can listen to this on Spotify if you prefer. Check the link in the description. Yellowjackets is a variation on Lord of the Flies. The premise is quite similar. A group of children suffers a plane crash, becomes stranded in the wild, and tries to recreate society and order in the best way they can, but ultimately they fall into barbarity which they also start enjoying. Lord of the Flies is often believed to be a deliberation on the nature of humanity, that is, until you learn that the author was a teacher in an all-boys school in Britain, in which case it is more so about how British boys are demons. Yellowjackets' premise is similar, but the subversion lies in how the story takes the themes of gender into account. An often repeated sentiment is that if Lord of the Flies was all girls, then instead of losing their collective minds, they would cooperate and get out of the island with no sweat. This specific premise was explored in the show The Wilds before it got cancelled when it introduced a group of boys, but Yellowjackets threw away the assumption that the girls would have this natural inclination towards goodness and cooperation. As Ashley Light, the co-writer of the story, says, it was literally Lord of the Flies but gender swapped. But what I think struck us was, I look at the comments because I'm always very curious what people have to say about things, and the comments were very brutal, but in a way that I thought was just deeply incorrect because it was like, oh, what are these girls going to do? Collaborate to death? And I was like, so you've never met a teenage girl? Good to know. It actually just added fuel to our fire, really, because we just thought we can prove that person wrong. Christina Ricci, who portrays adult Misty, agrees. I loved the way that these characters were not given any special handling just because they were women. There's a specific feminine way of brutalizing each other, said Tony Cypress, who plays the older version of Taissa, the team's enforcer. We can cut without weapons. According to Lyle, the real question is how did normal girls get from point A to point B? How do they go from having the most typical suburban teenage experience to doing the most extreme things a human being can do? The show is a metaphor for teenage hierarchy. These girls were already ravaging one another in 1996. Though amicable at first glance, the group is not nearly as united as one might think, and there's tension between them before the fatal crash. Shauna and Jackie are a duo of best friends, but Shauna always feels like Jackie's number 2, which leads her to sleep with Jackie's boyfriend and get pregnant with his child. Misty is the group's lol cow who is so desperate for validation and acceptance that her defining act right after the crash is to destroy the black box so that they don't get rescued. Ty literally broke her teammate's leg to get a better chance at winning the nationals. All these resentments are bubbling just under the surface and are ready to explode in such an extreme life or death situation. This isn't to say that there is no cooperation between the girls, but these violent hierarchies are only amplified by the wilderness and lead to lasting conflicts, which is far more interesting than, well, they're gonna be okay because they're girls. Teenage girls are some of the cruelest motherfuckers you're ever gonna meet, and the insidiousness of how violent the Yellowjackets become lies precisely in how, when society and its rules are left behind, the worst of them comes to the surface. Interestingly enough, the story of Yellowjackets was partially inspired by the famous plane crash that was carrying an Uruguayan rugby team and crashed in the Andes, after which the survivors eventually did resolve to cannibalism, but did not start a cult, stood united the entire time, had two of them literally walk across the Andes to save everyone, and the bonds they forged on that mountain kept them together for life. And this was mostly young men. It's hard to make sweeping statements about the nature of humanity based on two fictional stories and one real one. And there were certainly cases where stranded people did turn into the worst versions of themselves. But what makes Yellowjackets such a valuable story is that it takes one crucial aspect into account. In the wilderness, there is no one to tell the girls that they need to be gentle, polite flowers. In fact, for the sake of survival, they need to abandon those expectations and get their hands dirty, which is exactly where the power dynamics of the group shifts. This is best exemplified by the character of Jackie, played by the one and only Ella Purnell.
That's me!
She is the Yellowjackets captain, and one with the most influence in the group. The queen bee, but also not quite, as there's generally very little malice in her that you would see from, say, Regina George. And if there's any, it's not really her intention to be mean. Let's say she's the lady of the Wasps. But while Jackie possesses those classically feminine traits that put her at the top of the hierarchy at school, following the crash, they are a liability, and she progressively loses more and more of her influence. She has little skills that would help the group survive, and adjusting to this new life is visibly more difficult for her than for anyone else. As the group becomes more primal and animalistic, Jackie rigidly holds onto the rules of the civilization she left behind. This is represented by the fact that Jackie is the one who holds onto wearing makeup the longest. Jackie's ultimate fate is the group rejecting her and not protesting when Shauna exiles her outside the cabin, where she freezes to death due to the unexpected snowfall, but not before hallucinating being loved and respected once more. The team does grieve Jackie, but then they all viciously cannibalize her body, including the most morally sound character in the story, Natalie. This is the moment they let their primal urges overtake them completely, and a beginning of them turning from normal teenage girls into a cannibalistic cult. A point of except it isn't. Not really. The audience of the show got heavily preoccupied with the identity of the pit girl from the opening scene. It's understandable to want the answer to that, but the central question of this scene isn't really who is this, but how has it come to this? Seeing the opener for the first time, I was filled with a sense of dread and uneasiness. What interested me, and I imagine what interested the writers at the time, was what exactly happened that led these normal teenage girls into becoming these four bonding figures, chasing one of them down, stripping her naked and cannibalizing her. What did they witness and what did they have to do to go down on such a path? This may be a bit of circular reasoning, but I believe that my reading of the purpose of this scene is reinforced by the fact that it was not shot with the cast, but with stunt doubles, officially so that the mystery of who is who does not get spoiled, but in my humble opinion, precisely because it did not matter that much who is who. And while the showrunners had to provide the answer one way or another, the way they went about it made the horror of that scene outrageously retconned and downplayed. What sets the Yellowjackets on their path of animalistic depravity is not merely their need for survival. As you may recall, the Uruguayans faced even worse conditions, and they did not resort to hunting each other down for sport. The direction the Yellowjackets took was, in equal measure, their own darkness within taking physical form, and a potential spiritual force. The clinically schizophrenic Lottie becomes convinced that the wilderness, or it, is a godlike entity that demands sacrifices in exchange for the girls' survival. As of now, there is compelling evidence for both the supernatural and the mundane. Most of the freaky occurrences in the wilderness can be plausibly explained by the mercury poisoning theory, link in the description, but at some point, Lottie walks on the same pit that later kills Mary and remains unharmed. In order to salvage what's good about the show, I hope we do not get an explicit confirmation of the existence of the supernatural. This ambiguity is part of the appeal. This very ambiguity is present in whether the girls really believe in it or merely use it as a smokescreen for their own lust for blood. And you would think that the more time they spend in the wilderness, the worse these hunts would become, and its culmination would be the hunt on the pit girl, the moment they are at their lowest, darkest, and most animalistic. The moment when they all begin enjoying the depravity. As executive producer Jonathan LIECIO says, for these girls, the cannibalism is the ultimate cause and consequence of true and absolute freedom. They're never more alive than when they're in this feral state, and it plagues them as adults. They miss and long for a taste of that freedom. In the teen timeline, thus far there's actually only been 2 hunts. One on Natalie in season 2 that instead results in the death of Javi, and the one on Mari. And the pit girl hunt is not at all the horror it's made to be in the opening scene. It's a coordinated effort to distract Shauna, the real villain of the story. The showrunners insist that they knew all along that Mari is the pit girl, but I don't really believe that. My theory is that the pit girl was exactly who I said she was, a way to introduce the audience into the show. But since the audience got really obsessed with her identity, they had to address this and pick the most prominent dark-haired character from the supporting cast. If it was Mari all along, then why does she have more prominence and development as a character only in season 3, the one where she dies? Wouldn't her death hit that much harder if she was in the main cast all along? But the real problem isn't really the clunky choice of Mari, but how the show goes about that scene. The pit girl hunt happens so that the girls can make it out of the wilderness. In season 3, frog scientists Hannah and Edwin and their guide Kodiak encounter the girls in the wild, which is a long-awaited chance at rescue. But the issue is that 1. Shauna does not want to return, and 2. The new arrivals witness a decapitated head of Coach Ben, making them witnesses to the depravity and therefore loose ends. While the general public would generally be understanding towards the girls resorting to cannibalism to survive, they would all be viable for persecution if the actual truth came out. Lottie kills Elwin and Hannah kills Kodiak to prove her loyalty to the group, and it just so happens that Hannah had a broken CAT phone, which Misty tries to fix with the transponder from the plane, but they need to find a higher altitude, so for Natalie to sneak out unnoticed, they have to distract Shauna, so they pretend they want to have a hunt. Van and Taissa manipulate the card deck they use to pick the next victim so that Hannah draws the Queen of Hearts, but Shauna manipulates the draw and Mari gets chosen instead. The choice of the pit girl is therefore completely accidental. She was never supposed to be the pit girl, and they all feel so bad that it's her. And only Shauna wants her dead, so the whole pit girl hunt is faked. The most iconic scene in the show, filled with such unease and dread, was not scary at all. The Yellowjackets do everything in their power to give Mari a chance to survive, and only Shauna is genuinely out to get her. Even Lottie gives Mari a warning, which she ignores and falls into the pit. Misty's crazy-ass smile from the beginning wasn't really crazy. She smiles because she knows that the plan worked, and Natalie is presently calling for help. Oh, and these crazy costumes? They wear them not as a representation of their animalistic edges, but because Hannah pretends to be Natalie to throw Shauna off. The show is no longer about how these girls fell into their lowest instincts and grew to enjoy every second of it. It's Shauna who's the malevolent force in the group. Shauna and Lottie are the only ones to truly enjoy themselves in the wilderness, and only Shauna does so due to sadism, while Lottie enjoys it because she found spiritual purpose. This is additionally reinforced by how Shauna was the one to condemn Ben to death by forcing everyone to vote to kill him, even though at that point she does not hold that much influence in the group. Everyone else's hands remain clean. It is no longer about how they all became so fueled by violence that they no longer care if Ben's innocent or not, but about Shauna's totalitarian grip on them all. Granted, Shauna had always had darkness in her, But so did everyone else. Her change from an individual that's exactly as flawed as the rest of the group to bisexual Stalin is neither compelling nor believable. It's solely there to scapegoat her as the true villain of the story, while everyone else is helpless to do her bidding. Even Lottie, who is responsible for giving the group a convenient excuse for the hunts by introducing the belief system, is shown as better than Shauna, and she's also clinically insane. A grace that isn't given to Shauna, even though she most likely suffers from postpartum psychosis. This creates obvious contradictions in the adult timeline, which becomes the show's weakest point already in season 2. Adult Yellowjackets have no resentment towards Shauna. This is conveniently explained in season 3 by how seemingly all of them repress the memories of what had actually happened in the wilderness, but come on man, that's just an excuse for an obvious retcon. Why did they trust and even like Shauna in the adult timeline if she was the source of all their woes? The mistrust they have for Misty should have been reserved for Shauna. This is why the pit girl scene becomes so meaningless, because it no longer explains the special kind of guilt that the adults felt during seasons 1 and 2. Every once in a while, one of them goes, "We did fucked up stuff out there." The entire adult storyline hinges on them hiding what was the fucked up stuff. It's clear from the get-go that this wasn't just survival's guilt due to the need to eat your friends to survive. It's the guilt for the level of depravity they sinked down to and enjoyed every second of it. But the only one to truly enjoy the hunt on Mari on a sadistic level was Shauna. The only one who truly wanted Ben dead was Shauna. This wasn't the initial plan for the series. The pit girl hunt was supposed to be the height of their depravity, the peak horror of the series, not a coordinated effort to get out. And I refuse to believe that Shauna's behavior in the wilderness was what incentivized the women to be so ready for the hunt on Lottie's compound by the end of season 2. Lottie is convinced that the wilderness spirit came back with them to civilization and its hunger must be satiated. The remaining Yellowjackets are happy to provide. The irony here is that yes, it returned with them, because it was them. As Shauna says right after drawing the Queen of Hearts, "You know there is no it, right? It was just us." Because whether there are supernatural elements in this story or not, she's right. All of the choices they made were theirs. Nobody forced them to hunt. Nobody forced them to enjoy it. They all did it because the darkness they carried bubbled onto the surface. But in season 3, the fault for the depravity they fell into as a group is singularly placed on Shauna, and that's why Yellowjackets lost the plot. It's no longer about cannibalistic teenage girls who grew to revel in depravity, but about Shaunibal Lecter, whose influence is so strong that she made them all do it. And none of them sans Shauna and arguably Lottie actually enjoyed it. This cheapens all of their character arcs and is an active retcon. Turns out that all of them were just under the thumb of Osama bin Laden. They kinda forgot about it, but now they remembered, which is why they all have to jump Shauna. There is no it. It's just Shauna. By the end of season 3, Shauna reflects on her time in the wilderness.
I've tried for years to remember what happened out there, to understand why it seemed like I couldn't remember so much of it, why none of us could. I'm finally starting to realize we can't remember it because at some point we became so alive in that place that we lost our capacity for self-reflection. The trauma people say survivors forget things to protect themselves because they were so horrible. But I think we can't or won't remember it clearly because we recognize deep down that we were having so much fun. That's the terrible truth we left out there buried, along with the people we called our friends. Except it's all coming back to me now. The danger, the thrill, the person I was back then. Not a wife or a mother. I was a warrior. I was a fucking queen. I let all of it slip away from me. It's time to start taking it back.
These words echo the sentiment I mentioned earlier by the executive producer Jonathan LIECIO. For these girls, this is the ultimate cost and consequence of true and absolute freedom. They're never more alive than when they're in this feral state, and it plagues them as adults. They miss and long for a taste of that freedom. Except, is this even true anymore? because Shauna actually only talks about her own perspective, and the events of season 3 show that she was the only one deriving enjoyment and pleasure from the hunts. The other Yellowjackets suddenly remember that it was her who forced their hands. They were innocent bystanders. Complicit, sure, but ultimately not guilty. At the end of the day, did Yellowjackets not become what it swore it wasn't? Wasn't it all about how Lord of the Flies wouldn't be that much different if it was all girls? Because what we got is precisely that cliché, they will get out by the power of feminine friendships, and only one of them is truly messed up, while all the rest are merely her victims. Thanks for watching. Remember that if you like my videos, like, subscribe and share, so that more people can see it. Make sure to click the notification button so that you never miss a new video. And remember, Phoenix rises from the ashes, and ashes land on top.